Hello and welcome to the introduction to the management case study pre-scene examination for the August 2018 exam for the company called Montel. And the purpose of this introduction is to talk through the industry, point out a couple of things about the company, its competitors, a few things about the financial figures that we've been given. But be aware that the purpose of this isn't to highlight those topics that are most likely to come up in the exam. In the real exam, there's going to be 5 exams. There's 5 different variants, each one with 4 questions, 3 or 4 topics in each question. So you are looking at somewhere in the region of about 50 or 60 different topics that could come up here. And the thought that you could actually go through and identify which is likely to come up in your particular exam that you would sit is very unlikely. But having an awareness of the sort of things that are important to this industry can just get you thinking along the right sort of lines. And if you do go back and look at any of the past examinations, you will see that topics come up that you just simply couldn't have predicted off the back of what was in that pre-scene examination. But if we start off looking at the introduction about the company, it first of all tells you that it is a quoted company, which means it is listed on a stock exchange, which means there will be a share price. And this could conjure up questions based on being able to work out or discuss a weighted average cost of capital or takeover bids. The fact that it was set up in the 1920s is not going to be relevant to any decisions that you'll have to make and discussions that you'll do within the exam. However, this is a camera manufacturer, and the fact that they tell you it's sold through specialist camera shops, upmarket department stores and electronic shops makes you need to be aware of the fact that you might need to think about how you control these people, what targets you set, how you measure their performance. It then tells you that the company is based in a developed country. Now this gives the indication that people will potentially be skilled, a high level of education. They give you a currency, everything's just going to be done in dollars. They do tell you that the financial statements are done in accordance with IFRS. So any discussion that you have about financial standards has to be based on the standards that you've learned in SEMA, based on UK governance. You're then told that you are a financial manager. Your primary responsibilities are management accounting. That's the whole point about management level. The things that are to do with your figures, performance of the business, how you manage your staff, etc., are going to be particularly important to how you answer these questions. You then get a lot of information about the camera industry, and I would be very reluctant to sort of go through and fully try to understand how these cameras work. You are a management accountant, and therefore you don't need to be fully versed with the intricacies of cameras. The one thing I would say though is that when you look at how a camera works and it talks through how quality is so important to this business, you understand that having this skilled staff is going to be absolutely vital to an organisation. But it does make you wonder about whether any of this could be automated. Could you switch from labour to machine manufacturing and technology? You know, you then start thinking about what implications might that have for any redundancy. What impact is that going to have upon the culture of the business? But with regards to having to know how a camera operates, you are just not going to get any questions that get you to talk about that. Make sure you understand it, because if a question came up that just reminded you of it, I wouldn't want you to be surprised and think, what are they talking about? But I wouldn't be interested in trying to memorise anything about how all of this works. I would, however, be interested in the fact that it talks about the fact that digital cameras are rapidly replaced film cameras, the fact that they are so much easier, and the fact that they do talk about that a lot of people like the fact that they can post things on social media. And again, you should be thinking, especially if you've got your own smartphone, what is going to be the market for cameras in the future? Are people still going to want to buy digital cameras when they have a mobile phone? What sort of USPs could we potentially have that would make people want to buy our phones as opposed to just trying to use their smartphone? And we can see that the global sales of digital cameras has been declining over several years. And I don't think anyone can really see any reason why that isn't going to continue moving forward. Does this mean that the company is going to have to diversify? Do we have to come up with something new? Now, that won't be your decision at this paper, because that's a strategic decision, not a management decision, but they could talk to you about the fact that we are thinking about launching something different, and that would make me consider investment appraisal questions. Make sure you are happy doing things like net present value and payback and accounting rate of return, just in case they say, oh, you know, we're going to launch our own mobile phone that has a camera built into it, or we're going to launch a smart watch that has a camera built in. You know, these are the figures we expect to get. Do you think this could potentially be viable? But you are not going to be expected to make a decision as to the sort of things we could do in the future, because as I said before, that is a strategic decision, not a management decision. They introduce at the bottom of this page the idea that you have a main competitor, and it tells you that 97% of the market is covered by you two. I do find it quite suspicious that they talk about, they are fond of quoting the statistic. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a real statistic. It doesn't mean that it's been verified by anybody else. It doesn't tell you that it's going to continue to be that figure in the future, which could conjure up an ethical issue if you're advertising off the back of the fact that you are one of the largest manufacturers. What proof do you have to back it up that people are actually buying your particular camera? They do tell us that we do produce a range of different cameras, and again, you might have to have decisions about product abandonment. Should you get rid of a product so you can concentrate on the products that are going to be more profitable? Could you sell off that expertise to somebody else? You get obvious questions here, thinking about life cycle. If you launch a new product, how long do you think it's actually going to last for? And I think there are major differences between the life cycle of your top-end products compared to the life cycle of your budget products. Potentially budget ones where people see them as disposable, they could last, you know, a relatively long amount of time. People don't need high quality in their cheap photos that they do take and then dispose of the camera afterwards. But if you are going for the professional side, then as soon as new features come out that are going to be attractive to a professional photographer, then your old cameras could get replaced very, very quickly. The case then talks about the specific types of equipment that you have, and they talk through different types of models, thinking about your DSLR cameras, your digital single lens reflex cameras, the sort of top end cameras that we actually have and how they work. The one thing that I find quite interesting is the fact that you can have different lenses that can attach to this, and it tells you here that these cameras have these removable lenses which enable the photographer to carry replacement lenses to suit different needs. Now, this gives us different products to sell and focus on. You might then start thinking about contribution analysis. When we were thinking about should you abandon products, then, you know, maybe we should specialise in the lenses as opposed to the cameras, and you can look at the viability of doing this and how much profit if you're going to launch a new one or new factory, which product should we specialise in that particular area to make as much money as we can. And I do think the lenses could easily play a big part in one of the questions that you might get in one of the exams, especially if they can be used on competitors' products. So you could make a camera lens that not only could be used on yours, but could be interchanged between other people's, which could potentially give you a much broader market to focus on. I think the discussion towards the end of page 7 about the compact camera systems and the bridge cameras, I can't see anything specific about these other than the fact that they give us an opportunity to talk about a product specifically with regards to developing that product, making it a little bit better, thinking about what a customer actually needs from each one, and therefore you can start thinking about value analysis. What should be included in these products if we want to sell them? But I don't think anything unique about these particular products is going to be relevant in terms of what you need to know before you get into the exam. And the same goes for the compact cameras as well. Be aware of the product ranges, so you're not surprised again when they talk about them. I never need you to quote the sort of figures that they have. I mean, if you wanted to back up your arguments, you're talking about something, fine, but there's not many specific marks for memorising these things. Just be aware of where the numbers are in the case study in case you need to go back and refer to it. I'd be interested in the fact that they tell you that different towns produce different products, and therefore they could easily split this up, as I said, about the product abandonment and the impact that it has. Maybe you could try to merge these production centres and as such try to get some sort of economies of scale and reduce your overheads. Questions could get you to talk about the implications, the pros and cons of trying to make that happen, and the redundancies and the effect that it could have on morale if you try to do this. When we move on to page 11 of the case and the manufacturing of the camera lens, again I fall back to thinking about what we said at the start. I don't need to have specific knowledge about exactly how a camera is actually produced. Just the re-emphasis here of the fact that it does need skilled labour to do this. They talk about the fact that the lenses have got to be ground and polished, and that brings up obvious questions about how well we need to train our staff, thinking about things like total quality management. If you get these lenses wrong, the impact it has on your reputation and the cost of putting it right could be absolutely huge. But also think about the fact that anything that involves human beings, there's always going to be an element of risk that these people could potentially get it wrong. So do think about failure cost, internal failure, external failure, appraisal costs, prevention costs, etc. And just be prepared to explain, what these mean, how they work, given examples all the way through of how it would actually relate to Montel. The other parts of the production process, the coating, the lens barrel, assembling the lens, again, these are just parts of the production process that you just don't need to be able to remember off the top of your head. But, if you do want to make reference to the overall manufacturing process, it might be nice just to refer back to these as an example. But I think coming back to what we said before, having quality checks is just so vital to this organisation that must make sure they're being done. And it conjures up lots of questions that we could discuss.